So do you think still that Trump knows what he's doing, or is being told what to do, or is it something in between?
Let's put it this way. I believe that Trump has a mission. I'm not sure that he has a strategy, though.
Okay.
And so I think that his fumbling a lot. But I think that his mission is, and I even, I spoke with Susan Kokinda a few weeks ago, and she told me something that Trump said I think, during the election campaign in the gathering of the Republican caucus of Michigan. So this was not, hold on.
Yeah.
So this was not a campaign event with tens of thousands of people there. This was like a smaller gathering. But at the gathering, he called for the people present to join him in a decisive battle against the global financier class. I think that's pretty much exact words that Susan Kokinda said to me. And she made the effort to say exactly the words that Trump said. Now, if it's true that he said that, that's very significant, because that would be a very random thing to say unless you meant it.
Right.
And if you meant it, you had to have thought things through. You had to have understood what you're up against. And so I think that Trump is serious about this. And so far in these 8 months of his presidency, I see a lot of evidence that he actually means that. Now, where Trump is very difficult to approve of is the stuff going on in the Middle East.
Right.
But here's what I think, Larry. All of these events, like as George Soros told us, we're experiencing a conflict between two systems of governance. And that's not exactly right. It's one system against everybody else. And that one system is the neo-colonialist, imperialistic system of governance that always emanates from the money-lending oligarchies, which is, again, back to City of London and Wall Street.
Mm-hmm.
And everything else is downstream from there. Ukraine war and the war in Palestine, they're two different battlegrounds of the same conflict. And it seems to me that Trump is taking on the global financier class, but I think that he's not tackling it on the branch level. He's trying to tackle it at the root level. And so what do you have to do? I think that, and I think I pretty much made up my mind about this today, believe it or not. But I think that ultimately you're going to have to crash the dollar. You're going to have to bring the dollar to zero. And here's why I think that. I've been very mystified that the British, who are basically a small island nation, who have a really tiny army, and they have a very insignificant navy, and yet they're going everywhere around the world, and they're signing military cooperation agreements with all these governments everywhere. And they're everywhere. They're in Syria, they're in Bosnia, they're in Ukraine, they're signing 100-year. I couldn't understand, where does their power come from? And I worked out that they have a very, very extensive intelligence network, which is apparently very effective and very clever and very ruthless. They have special forces, which they deploy here and there as needed. They have certain influence over US policymaking. They definitely have dominance over Western mainstream media. And they have a very, very extensive network of NGOs, private corporations, charities, and things like this, through which they infiltrate target countries, penetrate into their government system, figure out where the pressure nodes are, and then work their influence like that. But still, that's a lot for one small island nation. And you need a lot of money for that, because even if you find those nodes, you're going to have to slip some money under the table to all those people. And we're talking
Right.
thousands upon thousands of NGOs. Somebody's funding them. How? And then basically it's the petrodollar system, which is in decline, but it still exists. And I just heard this morning, Alistair McLeod, he said that there's about $10 trillion in the petrodollar system, and is dominated by London through their, spider's web offshore centers. So they control that money, not the United States, even though it's US dollar.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's their sort of source of strength. And because it's the same currency as the US dollar in the United States, but you don't have control over it, I think you have to crash the dollar in order to finally quarantine the city of London and leave them to their own devices on their little island.
Yeah, no, I think that's where we're headed.
Yeah, and by the way, the monetary base of the United States, I think, is about $6 trillion. So if it's true that the petrodollar offshore dollar system is $10 trillion, that would mean that London has control over a bigger mass of US dollars than the United States does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's something I literally kind of came to that conclusion today after listening to Alistair McLeod's recent interview. But it makes sense to me because something has to explain the power of the United Kingdom, which is a basket case economically, financially, no army, no navy. How do they project so much power? There's got to be an explanation.
Yeah, no, I think that's actually pretty insightful, because you're right. Otherwise, I look at the UK as just like a snappy, nasty little dog with no teeth.
Correct.
Loud, obnoxious, but there's no visible power to it. But you're right. They sure seem to create a hell of a lot of mayhem in the world. And Syria, Armenia, Azerbaijan.
Larry, it's everywhere you look. I mean, I honestly came to the conclusion that probably if you manage to quarantine all the agents of the City of London around the world, if you manage to quarantine their influence, that probably 90, if not 100% of all the problems in the world would vanish. It's there everywhere. I was in February of this year, I read that Britain had signed a very hush-hush military cooperation agreement with the government of Bosnia and Herzegovina in Sarajevo. And I was floored. I thought, like, why? What's the connection? Why would, this is a nation in the middle of the Balkans, and this is the other nation, which is an island in the Atlantic with basically no army, no way to come to the aid if something happened. What's the logic? And then, I know that they signed a military cooperation agreement with Poland, with Denmark, with Sweden, with France. And then I went to a search engine to find nations with which Britain had signed military cooperation agreements over the recent years. And it's a few dozen of them. They're everywhere. They just signed a military cooperation agreement with Kazakhstan, and for the first time in history, they sent a military attaché there. Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, Sudan, Somalia, you name it, they're just everywhere. And pretty much everywhere they go, mayhem follows.